Today's kind of a pre-planning familiarization day with this Anaconda, and well, I hesitate there because I'm already kind of running into problems. The instruction manual, what small one there is, an aged one there is, says to build the fuselage first. Well, these are the parts to hold the wings on that go in this area underneath, and there's a slot for them in the fuselage. Turn on a light here, right here, so they can't really be put in after. They're going to have to be slid into these slots, probably like I did with the other ones. I'll glue one side in like this, let it set up, and then when I put the two halves together, I'll glue this part and this part as it goes into the other half. Just like I say, this is more pre-planning and familiarization with this particular kit. Because they would stick that far apart if you don't have it in the slot first. This back one in. Whoops. Yeah. I kind of put this together off camera. So it kind of goes together like that. It says to put the claw nuts in the wood and the screws that hold the wing on in to help position this. I'm sure that'll help. So those do have to go in. Can't be put in after the fuselage halves are glued together. That one needs a little adjustment. As far as the rear landing gear parts, I've got enough room to reach way back in there and get those on top where they need to be, so that's not going to be a problem. Other than that, sort of ready to glue the two halves together. There's one other little kerflunkel that has to do with the motor mount. Motor mount is two pieces. Now, if you look down in the bottom of the fuselage, whoopee! Let me sort of put this together a different way. There we go. That'll hold it while I work on this. The motor mount is two pieces. The smaller piece, of course, doesn't really mount in the fuselage. It's kind of the secondary piece. So this larger part right here needs to be mounted in the fuselage. So I'll take this back apart and put this in the fuselage. And there's a slot for the bigger piece. Just fits the bigger piece. Can't really put the smaller piece behind it, which is what I would like to do here. A whole lot. Guess it could be cut out to do that. But basically this piece would go in. It lines up with those four holes. Would go in like that later, with the motor being slipped in from the back, claw nuts being in these 4 holes so the screws can go in from the back. Let me get that sort of set up. So now that would look like this. For a second, imagine the motor's fixed to this piece. There's the larger piece that fits in the slot in the fuselage that would be glued into the fuselage. Claw nuts in the back facing this way, and then you would take this, go in like this with the motor and everything, line up the 4 holes like that, and screw the motor in through these 4 outside holes. That makes sense. And that's all really good to me, except for mounting the motor on this piece. And that's where I run into my first kerfluckle. So there's the motor mount. I've just got it mounted on there with 2 screws. So this could be mounted here and then slid in. Does that make sense? There's just one little problem. I'll take the motor mount back off of it real quick. Because as you can see, the motor mount not only, it would line up with 4 holes right here in the center to affix it on here. But the problem is that when it's lined up that way, there we go, these holes interfere with bolting this plate onto the other one for the metal ears out here, and they don't even line up at all. It's not the right fit. So looking online at how one gentleman did it, and I'll give you his name later, is he basically just mounted the motor to this. Somewhat like that. These screws are not long enough to do it. They don't have enough they'd come through these holes so quickly, in my opinion, with vibration and stuff. These other 2 don't line up well in there, but this could be drilled back just a hair to make these other 2 holes line up. I'd have to get screws with a different length to match the thread, but that would allow for this motor to be mounted in there. And the holes would line up to go through those 4 holes, just a little bit out, about like that, just down a little, but they would line up for bolts to go through these 4 holes and affix this to the motor mount that's glued into the fuselage. That means whatever hardware is back here would kind of be captured between those 2 pieces of wood, and if there's 4 of them in there, I hope it would keep it in there square and straight. Although this should be like at a 2-degree angle. I hope they put that in the foam on this when they did it. But that's the only way I can figure that out. Get different length bolts here, try to keep them as flush as possible, and put 4 in. So that's a little bit of a disappointment that that isn't better engineered. But isn't that half the reason we build these models? So that we can play engineer and modify it a little bit. So I'm not complaining about that a whole lot, but there's going to have to be some changes to this part for me. I probably have screws over in the box that will fit this, but boy, some of them are those big button head hex. It's going to be sticking up in this direction quite a ways between those two pieces, but again, try to get it in there straight. So that's one thing I've run into right away. And while I've got this here, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. Camera. Where would I put the camera? Well, the camera's pretty easy to put on this part, to have it up high, and the fuselage on top up here. The only thing I don't like about that is it doesn't let me look over the side of the airplane straight down. So the other place to mount it is here. Let me get the other piece that goes on there. But I think where I'm going to end up mounting it is on this platform right here, underneath the fuselage. This fits in here, so I can put a GoPro or Cube Orange or something so that it'll be taking videos out this. Of course, if I put a 4K, the new Oxnell on it, I don't need a secondary 4K camera. Let me pull that out a little bit. So I think I'm going to mount the camera right here. That way I can look straight down with it. I like looking at the ground more than anything, wildlife, topography, etc. So the motor mount's a little bit of a thing, but I think if I go ahead and glue this together, that all the rest of the hardware that goes in here for the front landing gear, getting lots of suggestions on the landing gear with the landing gear problem that seems to be out there. I won't have any problem, and like I say, I can get back in that fuselage all the way back there easily with my hand to put the top plywood on for the rear landing gear to be secure. So I'll probably start my first video on the build itself. I'll just rough up these surfaces on each side of this fuselage half, the surfaces underneath here where the larger wing attachment plates go, rough up these with sandpaper, probably rough up the top of the area back there for the landing gear, the foam itself, with sandpaper to get everything ready to be glued together, and I'll be gluing that together first. Let's look at some other things. One of the two large servos that came with it goes right here for the nose wheel steering. That's not going to be any problem at all that I can see. Actually, there's a plastic piece that goes in here that this mounts in, but going to be plenty of room for that to fit in there. These are the V-tail parts, sort of a V-tail. The four smaller servos, one goes in each side of this, and then the other ones actually do the flaps, in truth. These servos do go in there well. Hope you can see this, but there's sort of going to be an angle, a little bit of an angle out to the control horn. Those probably should have been engineered with this just a little bit over to the right, perhaps. That's not a big problem. It's a small problem. We'll take this out. Save that for the next part. So 2 of the small servos go here to work with the flaps. Just fits down in this slot. Of course, with the control horn over here, it's going to line up pretty good with this. It's going to line up pretty good where the control horn goes on here with the linkages. That's not a lot of a problem. Where I ran into more problems is out here where the ailerons are. And the ailerons take the bigger servo. 3 of these came with it. 1 for each aileron. With these ailerons so large as they are, as you can see from here to here, they're probably going to need the torque with this thing. They're 19 inches. The whole wing is 36, about 40. So they're fully half the length of the wing. And that's going to take some torque. The thing is this servo doesn't really fit this slot much at all. Going to have to be some it can be forced in there, which we all know. We're gonna, and see, that makes it sit in there kind of crooked. So there's going to have to be some foam cut. Whoops. Some foam cut. It will sort of go in there. It does line up pretty good with the aileron. But it's not, certainly doesn't fit like a glove. Perhaps different servos were used at some point. I wonder if there's a cut in this part that will accept that ear there. Yep, it does have a little slot there for the ear on the servo. Get it in there. These have to be cut back here for the couplers for the tail booms. Now, how does that go in there? Yeah, it doesn't quite, the servo doesn't quite go in there 100%. But I think it's just going to require cutting a little bit of this foam right here, and then it should drop in nicely, I believe. But again, this isn't as big a problem for me as the motor mount, and the motor mount, as you saw, was not insurmountable, just a little different. So again, I don't know about you, but that's why I build these things, is I have fun re-engineering little pieces and cutting a little foam. It's not a hard thing to do. So far, it's about all the problems that I've seen that I'll have to overcome to start doing my first build video. Thought about using the other motor to solve this problem, but I'll probably just figure out what thread size these are and see what I can do to make this work. Well, they seem to be sort of M2. 3 of them go in well. That 4th one doesn't quite want to work exactly. It's holding my screw over at an angle and trying to cross thread it. These tops, I'm going to have a washer or something on them, because if you tie them down, they'll just go sink right down in that hole and would come out eventually. But that'll kind of make a gap between the motor mount that's glued into the airplane and this one. But it sort of kind of solves my problem a little bit. Like I say, I'm going to have to get some kind of washers on these to make the head a little bit, head a little bit larger in diameter. So it looks like something like that's going to be the final solution. That they're not completely tightened down, but they do all line up. And the reason that one's not tightened down is because I found some slightly shorter screws that I'm going to use instead of those. But it looks like they're M3. Still, this one's one of the longer ones. And of course, you don't want to go too far through this plate and let the screw stick out inside and touch a winding. Immediate burn up, destroy the motor. So these are 6 millimeter long, and I think the other ones were 8. The box is not labeled anymore. And again, they're not all tightened down. But I think that's going to be the solution to that. It's not pretty. I don't like it. I don't like the space that's going to be created because of the way these stick up. But if I get them all tightened down to the same level, then I think this will go in, line up with the 4 holes, and mount up pretty well. Again, it's one of the reasons I build these things, is so I can modify little pieces and tweak little pieces for my needs. So I think that's solved. Started to buy the other motor, $74. It's a 520 to see if it fit better. Maybe its motor mount would fit those 4 holes and go through the motor mount and both these plywood pieces better. But I think this will be a solution without me having to pay that extra money. Well, can't think of anything else right off the bat that has seemed to be a problem on this. The servo, slight problem. The motor mount, a little bigger problem. There's just not much to worry about with this. It could be worse. So I'll put links to the ready-made RC instruction kit that there is on the internet for this model, and I'll put links to the gentleman's YouTube channel where he both talks about this motor. Better not run it at full throttle, it'll burn up, and a little bit about his build videos. His is the only build video for an Anaconda I've been able to find. If anybody else has a build video for an Anaconda, please, by all means, point me to it. Alright guys, more as I have it. Hopefully Anaconda build video 1 will be ready to go soon. Oh, and the H743 wing flight controllers for the Anaconda and the Flame Wheel came yesterday, so those are here too. Again, thank you.